Hello and welcome to episode 286 of the Extraordinary Business Book Club. I'm Alison Jones, doing something a bit extraordinary today actually, hope you like it. But first a bit of news from this end. Massive congratulations to the survivors of the 10-day Business Book Proposal Challenge. Absolutely brilliant crop of proposals completed, very, very proud. And I'm looking forward to seeing the final submissions come through by midnight tonight. That's Monday on the 27th of September. Going to be announcing the deal winner next week. If you didn't take part this time, then clearly it's not going to be you, and that's a shame, isn't it? So if you want to be in a better position next time round, you can sign up to the January 2022 Proposal Challenge right now. There is an early bird discount at the moment, so you can grab your slot and you'll have a good long time to do the pre-course preparation work. So there's not a huge amount of preparation work, but there is some, and it's useful to be able to do that thinking in a slightly more leisurely way rather than in the white heat of the challenge itself. And the other big news here is that Brand Tuned, the new rules of branding, strategy and intellectual property by Shireen Smith is out this week. Isn't it gorgeous? The Kindle edition is out today, 27th of September, and it's just £1.99 for launch. And the paperback is out tomorrow, 28th of September. And it's got so many amazing endorsements, this book, but I think that my favourite is from Rory Sutherland, who's the Vice Chairman of Ogilvy UK, who said, this is great, much though I didn't expect to, I enjoyed this book immensely. It was refreshing to see some legalistic rigour brought to bear on the most misused and overused term in the marketing lexicon. So this book it's valuable at any stage of your business, honestly. But if you're considering setting up a new brand, this could just be the most valuable investment you ever make. So congratulations, Shireen. It's such a smart topic for a business book. Right, something a bit different today. I was talking to a couple of publishing buddies about the typos, the grammatical errors, the stylistic quirks that really press our buttons. And then, stupidly, I put it out on Twitter as an invitation for editors to share their pet peeves. And I think it's fair to say that this hit a nerve, and I wasn't quite prepared for either the volume or the intensity of the response, which is silly, really, because I know how passionately editors care about this stuff. So don't worry, it isn't going to be a grammar police public information broadcast. But this is a really relevant topic if you're a business person, if you're writing a book on your area of expertise, and you want to submit a proposal to a publisher, say. Because guess what? It's going to be an editor evaluating that proposal. And you don't want to give them any reason to say no. And let me tell you that 90% of the population probably couldn't care less whether you've placed that apostrophe correctly or not. But all editors are part of the 10% that do. And they're not being petty, they're not like internet trolls weighing in uninvited, pointing the finger at a grammatical error, using it to punch someone down. This is their job. They've been trained to understand and appreciate and care about grammar, care about well-constructed language, and they kind of can't help but react when they see something wrong in their professional capacity. It's like asking an electrician not to wince when he sees some dodgy wiring. So that's reason number one for this podcast. Let's help you make a good impression if you are pitching your book. But honestly, being able to write confidently and credibly, it's a really valuable business skill. So if you just pick up one thing that gives you a bit more confidence about your writing or resolve something you've never been quite sure about, then frankly, this will have been a podcast well spent. So before I dive into the glitches, a couple of disclaimers. Firstly, it is really important to remember that this isn't the really important stuff. The really important stuff is what you're saying and how you're saying it. So the value of your message to your reader and the energy and the clarity with which you can put that across. So if the message doesn't have value, or if your tone is off key or boring, A-star grammar isn't going to save you. But if your message and tone are good and your grammar is poor, it can obscure them. It takes the focus off the message, and it also creates a bit of doubt in the editor's mind about your credibility, about your ability to write a book that won't cost the publisher either reputational damage or a fortune in copy editor fees. And another disclaimer, flawless English grammar is not an indicator of intelligence. It is a function of privilege. It almost certainly means that you are a native English speaker with a good education and no accessibility issues. If you're dyslexic, if you're not a native English speaker, or if you come from a very different socioeconomic space, then this is different. And make that clear in your cover letter. Editors have got a duty to be inclusive, and they want to be inclusive, but they need to know. Because warring with their recognition that we need more diverse voices is this hardwired aversion to the incorrect use of a semicolon. and we know that unconscious biases are at work all the time. So studies have shown that we rate the credibility of someone speaking in a different accent to us as lower than someone more like us. And this is just a version of that. And ultimately, you don't address unconscious bias by tiptoeing around it, by trying to kind of work around it. You have to name it, and once people see it, they can put in place structures to deal with it. So those disclaimers are important, but neither of them change the fact that you can increase your chances of making the impact that you deserve to make with editors, with any reader in fact, if you avoid these pitfalls. So here we go, in reverse order from 10 to 1, from the most trivial to the most enraging, the top 10 typos and grammatical errors to avoid if you don't want an editor to hurl your proposal across the room. So, in at number 10, unnecessary capitals. So this is a fairly trivial one. You could argue it's not even a grammatical error, actually, but I see a lot of proposals where capital letters are thrown around like typographic fairy dust. I think in an attempt to convey just how significant the capitalised words are. Another common habit is using title case. That means initial caps for every word apart from trivial words like a, the, to, and so on, beyond the actual title itself and into subheadings. There are two problems with this. The first is that people start to get confused about which words are really trivial enough not to need a capital. So yes, not a, but what about another? And not on, but what about longer prepositions like upon or against? And if you've got a hyphenated word, do you capitalise just the first word or the one after the hyphen too? So what happens is people play it safe, they capitalise every word, and then it ends up looking like the title page of a 17th century essay collection, which is bad enough if you're doing it for the title and subtitle, but then if you start doing that for subheadings too, you're going to push your editor beyond their limits. That's called start case. It's used in machine text processing. It has no place in the world of human writers and readers. So the basic rule of capital these days is kind of really the Einstein principle. As few as possible, but no fewer. So use title case for your title, obvs, capitalise every word of 4 letters or more, plus any significant shorter words like names or nouns, but then use sentence case for everything else, including your subtitle, which means an initial capital on the first word of every sentence, and of course initial capitals for proper nouns, people's names, places. If in doubt, err on the side of lowercase rather than uppercase, because I found most people's instinct is to overuse capitals, but also if you make something that's usually uppercase, lowercase, it looks kind of cool. If you do it the other way around, it just looks old-fashioned. Another one bubbling away at number 9, quite a low-level one, is the singular plural confusion. So at its simplest, this is just putting a singular verb form after more than one subject. So for example, reading widely and lots of writing practice is the secret of success. So you've got 2 subjects there, the reading and the writing practice, so you need the plural noun are. And that kind of might sound obvious, but when sentences get longer and more convoluted, it is actually quite easy to miss. But a more problematic version of person confusion comes when you're talking about third-person pronouns, which have transformed grammatically, socially over the last few years. So for millennia, we have had a simple binary split, grammatically, he, she. If you wanted a non-gender specific singular pronoun, you were stuck with it, which is literally dehumanising. So the English language is finally catching up with the reality that gender isn't a simple binary split. And so we have pressed into service the really helpful non-gender specific they to serve as a singular as well as the plural third person pronoun. Honestly, we've been doing this for centuries unofficially, but until now it's been regarded as grammatically incorrect, only suitable for informal use. And it was very telling, actually. If you were listening to the podcast last week, I was speaking to Jenna Ryan about her book Inclusive AF, and she told me how the copy editor removed every use of they as a singular pronoun and replaced it with he or she. And it's just old school grammar meets 21st century sensibilities, and the grammar is going to have to give. So if you want to use they as a singular pronoun, you go right ahead. But you're going to use the plural verb form along with it. So they are rather than they is, because that's what sounds right to us. But do not be bullied by any grammar Nazis into thinking that it is wrong. Language serves us, not the other way around. What you do need to be aware of, though, is the potential for misunderstanding. So let's use this made-up sentence for a non-binary individual, Cal, as an example. When teachers argued with Cal about disruptive behaviour, they became angry. So grammatically and probably instinctively, most native English language speakers would interpret the they there to refer to the teachers because that is the plural noun. So it's always just worth reading back over a sentence with extra care if you are using they as a singular pronoun, just to check it for potential ambiguity. Up to number 8 now, which is the which, that debate. So is it, for example, the stage that Shakespeare walked on is unsafe, or the stage which Shakespeare walked on is unsafe? So I actually think this one's fairly simple. You just have to remember that which can be switched. So which introduces a bit of additional information. You could do without it, and the sentence would still make complete sense. Or you could even substitute a different fact. You can switch the which. So the stage, which is really old, is unsafe. See, still works. So try putting commas around the which clause to see if you can lift it out without really damaging the sentence. The important thing here is that the stage is unsafe, and everyone's already aware of what stage you're talking about. That, on the other hand, defines the stage that you are talking about. So in grammatical terms, it's a restrictive clause. It defines, the stage that you mean. And if you take it away, people don't have enough information. Wait, the stage Shakespeare walked on or the one over there? So as a rule of thumb, I would always put a comma before which and never before that. Coming in at number 7 is a perennial pet peeve, less instead of fewer for non-count nouns. And it always cracks me up that Waitrose, which is the posh person's supermarket here in the UK, it's pretty much the only one to bother about getting this grammatically correct. So if you go into a Waitrose, there will be a sign over a till at the end saying 10 items or fewer. And if you listen really hard, you can probably hear the grammar police in there purring with happiness. Any other shop, you're much more likely to see 10 items or less because that is what most people say. And fewer can sound a bit pompous. But it isn't a hard one to learn, so you might as well get it right, make your editor happy. Basically, if you can count the thing that you're talking about, you use fewer. If you can't, you use less. So fewer items, less waste. Fewer teenagers, less mess. Usually, if it's a singular noun, you are looking at less. If it's a simple plural, you're going to want to use fewer. The big exception is if you're measuring time or money, because you would say less than 2 years or less than $1 million. You would never say fewer there. Look, I do not make the rules. I'm sorry. At number 6, it is the inexplicable reluctance of people to use me. And this one takes 2 forms. Firstly, there's the temptation to go all royal and say something like, my husband and I, when it's not appropriate. So for example, they gave the gift to my husband and I. And the hard thing about this is that sounds right. And that makes it really tough to spot. So the best way to check it is to take the other person out. You would not say they gave the gift to I. Would you? Grammatically, nothing changes when you add a husband in. You're both still indirect objects in that sentence. You're not the subjects. So it's me, not I. And I don't know why they gave the gift to my husband and me doesn't sound quite right. And if I were writing that, I'd probably rewrite it. So it was something like, they gave the gift to me and my husband, or just to us. But grammatically, my husband and me is absolutely correct. The other way that people avoid using me is to replace it with myself. They gave it to myself, for example. Again, it's me. There's no getting around it. You can use myself in a sentence like that, but you have to be the subject. I gave it to myself. So technically it's being used then as a reflexive pronoun. It's reflecting back to the subject. I learned that by remembering the S in myself and linking it to S for subject. That might help you. It might not. Take it or leave it. Right, we're getting serious now, into the top half. In at number 5 is the hyphen. Now, I'm not talking about dashes here. Technically, an M dash, which is the length of a standard letter M, would be used almost like parentheses in a sentence to show a linked thought, and it might or it might not have spaces around it. And an N dash, which is, you guessed it, the length of a standard letter N, is used to signify a range of years or pages, for example, or to link two separate words of equal weight, the Edinburgh-London train. And it's always used without spaces around it. I'm talking here about hyphens, which are used to link two words or parts of words to form a new word. So, for example, son-in-law. But where people tend to come unstuck with hyphens is with compound adjectives, where you have more than one word modifying the noun that follows. And a classic example that I always use here is man-eating rabbit. You put a hyphen in there between man and eating, and it's clear that you have got a seriously terrifying small mammal problem. Without the hyphen, it's just Mr. McGregor sitting down for tea. But you can take this too far. So if one of those words is an adverb, as in that phrase I just used, seriously terrifying, you do not need a hyphen. There is no possibility of confusion there. The other clever way that people tie themselves up in hyphens is with prefixes. Is it anti-fragile with a hyphen or anti-fragile without, for example? And the answer is nobody really knows. When it's a newish word, it's anybody's guess. And honestly, I tend to go purely by instinct here. Sometimes it just looks wrong without a hyphen. Or I want to emphasise the two parts of the word, in which case stick in the hyphen, unless it looks wrong, in which case I take it out. Look, do you know, this is an art as much as a science. You can always Google to see where the consensus lies and then make your decision. Getting serious now. At number 4, we find noun-verb confusion. In the UK, one of the most common is practice with a C, which is a noun. I'm going to do my piano practice. And practice with an S, which is a verb. I'm practicing my piano scales. So the Americans very sensibly looked at this and went, I don't think so. And they only have practice with a C, which means as we in the UK consume so much US media, practice with an S is starting to look wrong to us and we don't really understand the difference anymore. And it also means that most editors are not going to be too bothered by this unless you use practice the verb with an S, where you mean practice the noun with a C, in which case it is just wrong. No matter which side of the Atlantic you're on. What really is wrong, though, is using advise the verb with an S when you mean advice the noun with a C. There is no blaming that one on transatlantic usage. But at least those two sound different, so you have got a fighting chance. The other classic is affect, effect. Affect with an A, effect with an E. And these are actually different words, but they are so closely related that it's not surprising people mix them up. Usually, affect is a verb, and it's what something does to something else. My grammar pedantry affects my relationship with my life partner. Effect is a noun, and it's the result of whatever is affecting the situation. The effect of my pedantry is that my partner refuses to speak to me. This is one of those you just have to learn, I think, but it might help to remember that the order of the vowels is AE, and the thing doing the affecting comes first, and only then can you see the effect, so AE. And actually, it's not strictly verb-noun confusion, but I'm also going to give a shout out here to lose and loose. So lose with one O is a verb. You lose weight, or at least some people do, me not so much. But loose is an adjective. When you've lost weight, your clothes feel loose. At least that's what people tell me. And again, they sound different. And I remember as a kid telling myself that when you lose something, you've got less of it. So only the one O there. That was super helpful to 8-year-old me. Might not work for you, but there you go. And now we're into the top 3 things that make editors wince. And it was very close at the top. But in at number 3, it's would've, could've, should've. As in, I would have baked you a cake if I'd known it was your birthday. I could have died. You should have listened. The good news is that this is dead easy to spot and fix. You just need to know that would've, which sounds exactly like would've, is short for would have. Ditto could've, could have, should've, should have. So using of instead of have, I'm really sorry, it's just wrong. It's not one of those grey areas. It's never okay. and it's such a fundamental mistake that it really can, rightly or wrongly, damage your credibility. But at least this is a consistent rule, right? Just missing out of the number 1 spot. In at number 2 is, of course, the apostrophe. I bet you wondered when that one was coming. And I feel like the apostrophe could kind of be a whole episode on its own. I'm going to try and keep it short. The most common apostrophe fails are in let's, it's, and there. So let's take let's first. See what I did there? The important thing to remember with apostrophes is that they usually indicate contractions. They're replacing missing letters. So you have to kind of reverse engineer what it is you're writing to work out what's missing. So when I say, let's take this first, the full form of that would of course be, let us take this first. But of course no one says that unless they're in a pulpit or behind a lectern. But just thinking that through, that just makes you realise, oh, okay, missing you in us, we're going to need an apostrophe here. Same with we're for we are, I'm for I am. So just mentally unpack it to see if it's a contraction of what would otherwise be a longer sentence, that there's letters missing, and if there are, stick in the apostrophe where the letters should be. So, quick test. He lets me get away with murder. Apostrophe or no? Yeah, no apostrophe. Let's here is just the third person verb form. There are no missing letters here, so no need for an apostrophe. Let's is just the warm-up. Ready to tackle it's? Honestly, as long as you remember the thing about the apostrophe showing a contraction, it's easy. If you can replace it's with it is, boom, contraction, therefore apostrophe. If you can't, no contraction, no apostrophe. So, quick test. It's sunny today, apostrophe? Hell yes, because if you wrote that in full, it would be, it is sunny today. Today was notable for its sunniness, apostrophe? Hell no, because you are not saying notable for it is sunniness. And exactly the same principle works for your. I think you're wrong. Full version, I think you are wrong, therefore contraction, therefore apostrophe to show the missing A. I like your tattoo. No letters missing there, no contraction, therefore no apostrophe. We are just talking about the tattoo that belongs to you. Another common one is whose and whose. Who's up for coffee? Who is, missing letter, contraction, apostrophe. Whose coffee is this? No letters missing here. We are talking about belonging again. No apostrophe, slightly different word, bit of a tricky one that. But honestly, if you take nothing else from today's podcast, getting that one right is going to give you a massive credibility boost when you write. I think we're ready to tackle there. This one is exactly the same. There with an apostrophe if you're saying they are. But if it's not that one, there are two different theirs it could be, which is just mean. I say try they are first. And if it works, bingo, there, put the apostrophe in. If it doesn't, then you need to decide whether this is something that belongs to them, just like it's and your above, in which case it's their, T-H-E-I-R, or the answer to the question where, in which case it's their, T-H-E-R-E. So I think they're nuts. They are contraction, apostrophe, boom. I like their nuts. No contraction. These are the nuts that belong to them. Therefore, their, T-H-E-I-R. There are the nuts. Or, I put the nuts there. Both possible answers to the question, where are the nuts? So take that W off where and use there. I hope you're still with me. We are nearly there, people. Finally, top one, and I am cheating a bit here really, because the three different theirs that we just talked about, they're what's known as homonyms. And that is what I chose from all the stuff that came in as the number one error, guaranteed to make an editor howl. So homonyms are words that sound alike or look alike, often both. And honestly, I'm really sorry, but there's no magic bullet. You kind of just have to learn them. Or perhaps more realistically, you just have to be aware of them and know that you need to check them when you use them. So I'm just going to gallop through these. I don't have any magic tricks to help you learn them. Really sorry, but hopefully at least you can be aware of them. So some of the common culprits, in addition to the ones that we've already looked at under apostrophes, are complementary with an I and complementary with an E. And this, honestly, is probably the one that I see most frequently confused. If it's complementary with an I, it's free. If it's complementary with an E, it's working in harmony with something else. That can be a really, really expensive mistake to make in your marketing copy. Another similar one is stationery, stationery with an A or with an E. This one gets used in business quite a lot as well. If you're talking about pencils and Post-its, that is stationery with an E. If you're talking about something that's standing still, it's stationary with an A. I don't have a rule for that. I just remember to check it. Accept and accept. I think it's surprising how common this is because they do look very different, but I see them confused quite a lot. I accept your argument, except for your point about Jaffa cakes. Now, I don't know if this will help, but you could try remembering that X means out of, like exit, and therefore accept means that you're excluding something or taking it out. That might help. Help me, might help you. Hope so. And then there's peak, peak and peak. So P-E-A-K, P-I-Q-U-E and P-E-E-K. You reach the peak of your career with an A, you pique someone's interest with a Q, and you take a peek at your partner's diary with a double E, or let's hope you don't, actually. Again, you just got to learn it, really. Then there's allowed, A-L-L-O-W-E-D, you're allowed to cry. Please don't cry. Allowed, A-L-O-U-D. And then lastly, forward and forward. So the book had a foreword by Seth Godin, F-O-R-E-W-O-R-D, but forward, I am moving forward with my writing, F-O-R-W-A-R-D. And that last one is particularly pernicious if you are writing a book proposal, because it's probably the first time that you've ever had to use it in writing. Forward is the word that comes before the text. And just as a side note, actually, a foreword is usually written by someone else, not the author. So don't use it when you really mean preface or introduction. And that's it. Now, you might have noticed that I didn't include colons and semicolons in here. Why not? Just too complicated. Yes, editors pride themselves on knowing when to use them correctly, but honestly, it's right up there at the dark art level of grammar ninja, along with modal auxiliary verbs and participial adjectives. And unless you really go berserk with them, no editor's going to think any less of you for the odd misplaced semicolon. It confirms their sense of their own superiority, gives the copy editor something to do. Buy me a drink one day, I will happily tell you my own thoughts on when to use colons, when to use semicolons, but not here, life's too short. I also didn't include who, whom, which a couple of people suggested, because honestly, even if you use whom correctly as the object of the sentence, it makes you sound like you've got a pole stuck up your backside. And if you use it incorrectly, you just look ridiculous. So I say don't use it. It's dying, and good riddance. One good tip for catching many of these errors is to read your own writing out loud before you press send. If you're a native English speaker, you have got an instinctive grasp of grammar that goes way beyond what you could actually explain to someone else. So if something sounds off, it probably is, even if you don't know why. Now, I say that's it, but actually a few of the things that came up in the Twitter tsunami weren't really grammar glitches. They were just things that drive editors mad. So here's a bonus top 5 that has no obvious title other than other stuff that editors hate and you should try not to do. In at number 5, it's telling rather than showing. If you have to tell the editor that your manuscript is funny or fresh, you have already lost the battle. They're going to make their own mind up, so just focus on being funny or fresh or whatever. Straight in at number 4, it's mixed metaphors. Sometimes these are obvious. I remember a song that I learned at school that included the glorious line, with our backs to the wall and our best foot forward, we'll all put our shoulder to the wheel, which is a glorious image. But sometimes they're less obvious because we're not even aware that we are using a metaphor because it's so common. So, for example, I saw a business headline recently that described a city as one of many flashpoints of the housing bubble. It sounds a bit odd, but it's only when you stop and think about it that you realise, wait a minute, bubbles don't have flashpoints. So they can be tricky to spot, but they almost always sound off, even if you don't quite know what's wrong. Joint number 3 in this supplementary chart are lazy descriptors and cliches. Feisty woman, heart of gold, majestic oak tree. And of course, the famous tongue-in-cheek instruction to writers is avoid cliches like the plague. Again, you've often got to read what you've written a couple of times to spot them, but they have this kind of deadening effect. They're so familiar, they don't really make a dent in our consciousness anymore. So if you want to make an impact, find a fresh way of saying something. And they can also embed bias and prejudice. I think feisty is a great example of that. It's never applied to a man, and it carries this subtly demeaning quality that reflects a particular attitude towards women who dare to speak up. Just outside the number 1 spot at number 2, it's overwriting. So before you submit a bit of writing that matters, spot check it for redundancy. Have you repeated yourself? Is every phrase really necessary? Have you stuffed it with meaningless words and unnecessary qualifiers? Just, really, very, quite, in my opinion, I feel that. I read some brilliant advice from Tara Moore that calls out the tics that women particularly use in speech and writing, kind of in order to soften the message, to appear more likeable. She said, instead of using the self-diminishing qualifiers, just, actually, sorry but, I'm not sure but, etc., so that you seem nice, communicate both your warmth and competence in a proactive, positive way. I think it's great advice. And then right at the top, number 1, the cardinal sin that you can commit as a business book writer at least is making it all about you. Fine, if you are Richard Branson, if you are Oprah Winfrey, okay, I am happy to read a book that is all about you. For the rest of us, nobody's that interested in our story. I mean, they might want to know a bit about us. They might want to know what qualifies us to write the book, for example, or something that shows that we understand and empathise with the pain that they're feeling, that we found a way to overcome and find success. And Donald Miller in Building a Story Brand puts this really well. He says a guide, which is what you're positioning yourself as an author, needs both empathy and authority. And your story helps establish both of those. But that is really different to just self-consciously, self-congratulatory sort of telling of your own story in all its gory detail. When you tell your story in the service of the reader, then you're framing it to connect with them and you are focusing on their experience and the outcomes that they want to see. So if you write about yourself, try this. It might sound ruthless, but it does work. Just stop. Put yourself into the shoes of a reader who doesn't know you, has no reason to care about you, and just ask yourself, so what? And if you can't honestly answer that for them, then you have probably crossed the line into serving yourself rather than your reader. Get a journal and write about your story to your heart's content there. It's actually a great thing to do. It will help you process your experience. It'll probably draw some really useful lessons from it, but do that work in private and keep your business book focused on your reader, not on you. Now, today I have been talking about performative writing, if you like, writing intended to impress an editor. I call that explanatory writing. But I also just mentioned journaling, and that's an example of a very different process, which I think of as exploratory writing. And even just knowing that those two things are different is huge. I often have people tell me, I can't write, I'm not a writer. And to me, it's like singing. If someone says, I can't sing, they don't literally mean that they can't sing. They just mean they'd never get up on stage and sing in front of people. They can't sing performatively. They can sing perfectly well in the shower when there's nobody listening. And it might actually, yes, genuinely sound truly awful to anybody else. But the act of singing does all sorts of good for their well-being and mood. And I think we've forgotten that writing doesn't have to be performative. I think especially as business people, we've got so hung up on writing that's intended for other people to explain or persuade or influence that we have completely forgotten we can use writing just for ourselves in the metaphorical shower. Do not try this in the literal shower. With nobody watching, just to help us process stuff, follow a half-formed thought, name and explore an emotional state, think through a conflict situation from the other person's perspective, reflect on why something went well or not so well. If you have a really good coach, you might get to do some of this stuff sometimes. But an exploratory writing practice, that gives you the space to do it for yourself every day if you want to, for free, anywhere, at any moment, without worrying about any of the grammatical gubbins that I've just been talking about. It is such a powerful, lightweight tool, and it's so totally overlooked, and I am on a mission to change that. So my new course, Right Brained, is a 28-day exploratory writing adventure, and it starts on the 1st of October. And I'm so excited about this. I launched the beta back in June with a small group, and the reaction was absolutely astonishing. Here's some of the responses.
I think what was most surprising about the course is how speedily you can actually shape your random thinking into powerful insights that are relevant for what I'm writing, what I'm doing, what I'm coaching. And as someone who's always avoided free writing, because actually I just tend to overthink it, and I just have far too many creative thoughts going on in my head, it was deeply cool.
It gave me a lot of techniques to think through problems, how to articulate them, how to see them from a different perspective, how to think through whether there might be related problems that might help me see an answer, and also to come up with innovative solutions. The course only involves a few minutes of focused activity a day, so you really have no excuse for being too busy. And, you know, at the end of the 4 weeks, I had pages and pages of notes on relevant issues which I can use and implement in my business.
Alison takes you through a process over the 4 weeks. So you start with the basics to get up to speed on how to use writing for reflective practice and business personal development. Then as you go through the 4 weeks, Alison introduces a range of approaches and angles and exercises. At the end of the course, not only will you have done a lot of great business thinking and writing, but of course you'll have a fantastic toolkit that you can take away and use over and over again. I spent 15 minutes a day on the course, and that included watching Alison's introductory videos, doing the 6-minute writing exercise, and also a short reflection afterwards on the exercise. So you really can fit it into a busy day. And going forward, there's exercises that you can literally do 6 minutes a day. So in a way, the busier you are, the more you need this course for personal business development and reflection.
So if you want to take part, there is a special launch discount, and the link to the waitlist is at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. Right, reading news. Here are my hot new reads for this week. First, of course, is Brand Tuned, the new rules of branding, strategy and intellectual property by Shireen Smith, which is published by Practical Inspiration Publishing. Here it is again. Right, gorgeous cover. The ebook is out on the 27th of September. It's just £1.99 for launch, and the paperback is out on the 28th of September. And as I said, so many endorsements for this book, so I'm just going to share one more. Your brand is a cornerstone asset, and it's worth getting right. This book will make sure you're creating a brand in line with the latest evidence-based thinking on how brands grow and how to develop distinctive brand assets. This book should be a companion for any entrepreneur with the ambition to create real value. And that is from Daniel Priestley. He knows what he's talking about. Also out on the 28th of September is Ryan Holiday's latest book, Courage is Calling, Fortune Favours the Brave. The Brave from Profile Books. And it's another one drawing from his love of Stoic philosophy, and I don't know, it looks like it might be a bit overblown, but he does write well and it does sound very stirring. And finally, the much more sober Rationality, What It Is, Why It Seems Scarce, Why It Matters by Steven Pinker, which is also out on the 28th of September as a hardback from Alan Lane and also on Kindle. Steven Pinker, quite frankly, could write a shopping list and I'd want to read it. The Language Instinct is still one of my all-time favourite books. And here's an example of marketing blurb that has really hit the spot. In the 21st century, humanity is reaching new heights of scientific understanding, and at the same time appears to be losing its mind. How can a species that discovered vaccines for COVID-19 in less than a year produce so much fake news, quack cures and conspiracy theorising? Well, quite. So I hope you like the sound of at least one of those. As always, do let me know what you think if you read them. And that's it. It's been really odd doing a whole episode to camera for the first time, including the intro and the outro and whatnot. If you're listening to this on one of the usual audio channels, do head over to extraordinarybusinessbooks.com, where you can see the video as well and have a good laugh at my frightened rabbit face, and there's kind of some explainers for the grammar points. And hey, you can subscribe while you're over there, and you can give it a thumbs up if you're feeling generous. You can even share it. You could tell someone else about it if you want a bit of undying gratitude in your karmic bank. But that is it from me for this week. I really hope you've enjoyed the episode. I'll see you next week. Keep on reading and writing those extraordinary business books. Goodbye for now.